Chiron, the wounded healer, leaves the sign of Aries and descends into the physical territory of Taurus. This happens on June 19th, 2026. It's a return to the body, the place where his story of suffering first began. Today we're moving through the medicine hidden within this wound and what this specific crossing opens for all 12 rising signs. So I've listed every sign with its direct link in the pinned comments below so you can find yours easily. Now, Taurus has to do with money, with value, and of course, with our physicality and our bodies. And to understand what it means for Chiron to enter the sign of the physical body, it's important that we know more about his relationship with his own body. So Chiron was a centaur. He was half horse and half human. So already he's a bridge between our self-concept of human as separate from the animal world. And he's very different than the other centaurs who were, very appetite-driven and wild. He's a much gentler soul, and his origin is stranger and maybe lonelier. The Titan Kronos, otherwise known as Saturn, or Kronos, think chronological, time, limitation, and also manifestation into form. Kronos desired the nymph Philyra and disguised himself in the form of a horse. So Chiron was conceived in that union. When Philyra saw what she had borne, this child who was neither horse nor god nor wholly human, she was repelled, and she begged the gods to take her child away from her. So she abandoned her child and rejected him, and she was turned into a linden tree rather than mothering him. We should pause here because this is the root of Chiron's ultimate wound. Chiron's very first experience of having a body is his mother's revulsion at it. So before any injury, the original wound is the wound of embodiment itself. I was looked at in my flesh, in the creature that I am, born out of my mother's body, and I was turned away from that same body. And so this is where he begins. He's abandoned for the form he was given. And what he becomes from that abandonment, though, is what's extraordinary about Chiron and why he has such a prominent place in the celestial bodies. He becomes the embodiment of wisdom and teaching, and he masters medicine and music and astrology, prophecy, and the art of healing. So kings send their sons to be raised by him. Gods do as well. Asclepius, the god of medicine, learns at his feet. Chiron becomes the teacher of healers and the one others come to in their pain. The story of his wounding doesn't end there. There's an unbearable turn in that Hercules, in a careless skirmish, looses an arrow steeped in the venom of the Hydra. This is one of the versions of the story, and it strikes Chiron in his body, in his leg, and the poison can't be cured, not even by him, and he's the greatest healer alive. And because he's immortal, he can't die to escape it. And so he's left to carry a wound in his own flesh that he can't mend, and that won't release him. Now we can focus on the wound only because the wound is where Chiron gets his epithet, the wounded healer. But Chiron's more than that. He's the healing of an old split, this belief that we're separate from the animal world and that the divine lives somewhere other than the body. So half human, half horse, Chiron is the living proof, or the archetypal proof, that the split was never real. So he stands where instinct and soul and body and mind, heart and knowing all meet. And in his body, they weren't divided. But the wounding is coming from this sense that they are. and his mother rejects him for it. So in your chart, he marks where you carry that fracture and where it can also close. And that's also the work of the Chiron return, which some of you mentioned in the comments as being curious about. So we'll speak about that a little bit more in a moment. And I also want to share with you that I have a reading that is on sale. There's a sale window until the 24th of June, just about Chiron, where we focus in on your Chiron and how the wound you've been carrying since the beginning is also your superpower. Your sensitivities, where your creativity is coming from, and that's also your special medicine and where your true essence is trying to bloom. So I'll have the link for that in the pinned comment as well and in the description. So what Chiron does with his wounding is the whole teaching here. He doesn't stop healing others. He keeps teaching. He keeps tending. And that's kind of what Chiron invites us to do. Is not try to close the wound, not try to fix ourselves or make it different or better or find a way to kind of yoga or health around it or therapy around it, but to tend it instead, right? So he keeps being the one that others come to as well. And all while carrying the wound, he becomes wise, not in spite of his pain, but straight through the middle of it by leaning into it. And the way he's released from his pain ultimately is by helping Prometheus, who you may know gave fire to humanity, by helping Prometheus gain his freedom. So he gives up his own deathlessness, his own immortality, and he's released at last from the endless wound, and then he's set among the stars. So he's set free by surrendering to letting go of something very valuable, which would be immortality, right? Wouldn't we all like to not die, seemingly? But he's showing how the ending and the releasing is releasing what's trapping him also. And he's serving someone else at the same time. So again, this kind of connects back to his father relationship with Saturn, Kronos, and time, and our bodies, and the way that we inevitably change as we go along in life. And we have Saturn returns, and we also have a Chiron return. And the Chiron return comes when we're about 50 years old. And it's a time of transition when we claim that wound as our own, knowing that it's not going to go away, but we can make a choice to own it. And instead of it continuing to cost us, that we can use it for liberation and for service and to claim our own sovereignty. It corresponds in female bodies with menopause, this moment of transition when, we've been told that that's like when life kind of ends and we just sort of fade away into the sunset, but that's not true in lived experience. What's true for a lot of people is that this becomes a time of greater sovereignty and aliveness. So let's hold the story of Chiron against the sign that he's entering, and let's look at how this may affect us. So Taurus is the body as a place of belonging and pleasure. It's the senses, the earth, our finances, our values also. It's the warm animal fact of being here. It's the right to eat, to rest, to have enough, to be touched, to take up space, to have. Taurus's keywords are I have. To enjoy being a creature without having to justify our enjoyment of being an earthling. So Taurus is ruled by Venus. And so this is the territory of pleasure and worth and of being delighted in and delighting in oneself, right? So our ability to be enjoyed and to enjoy and to be fully, really present in real time, not in the past or the future, but physically embodied. And one of the techniques for doing that, of course, is to tune into our senses. This is exactly where Chiron's wound was born. His body was the thing rejected. His animal half is where the incurable poison sits. And again, the whole body of Chiron is animal, right? Human is animal, and animal is divine. But his very being kind of speaks to the way that we conceptualize a split between those things. So he kind of embodies where they intersect again. So when the wounded healer of the body enters the sign of the body, the wound and the ground become the same flesh. The divine and the flesh become the same ground, right? We tend to think of other animals and plants as somehow non-divine. Maybe Chiron and Taurus can help us question that a bit more and heal the things that split and that idea has caused in us, and especially our disconnection from the feminine and from the body of the earth, and all the ways that that's caused and continues to cause, is moving us toward our demise, really. So what Chiron in Taurus opens in us is the deep, often wordless sense that the body is somehow not allowed. Again, it's something to transcend. It's something non-divine. To want is shameful. Desire is shameful. That your appetites are the animal part, and that is the part that might get you rejected. So you have to domesticate it and condition it a certain way. Also, that the body is there to be productive primarily, and that you must earn the right to take up space, that rest must be deserved, that pleasure is something you pay for rather than something that was always yours to have just by virtue of being a child of the earth, right? So for some, this lives in the body that was shamed or policed, the hunger that was made wrong, and who we all have this wound. This is something that we're all living with, right? Touch that came without safety, where our bodies were used, or the definition of trauma is something that happens to us that we can't stop from happening, and that causes us damage. The worth that was made conditional on what you produce rather than on the simple fact that you exist. So this is the wound of our systems that our bodies are expected to yield to, and where we lose feeling and we become numb, we become anesthetic, right? Anesthetized. Aesthetic is the opposite of anesthetic, and aesthetics are Venusian. That's Venus's domain, and aesthetic means to perceive, right? The root word of it is connected to perception, to feel. Because Venus rules this ground, the wound is in her territory. So underneath it sits the oldest question in the Chiron story, the one that Philyra created with her turning away, or the violation created in her feminine body, and her then turning that disgust inward and toward her child. Am I something that can be delighted in? As I am? And I'd say probably a lot of us would say no. I don't feel that that's available to me the way that I wish it was. And it's not a small wound. It's one of the most universal ones that we carry, because we've all learned to treat the body as a problem to manage rather than a home to live in. And it's a wound of the feminine. The parent who mothers us is the parent who teaches us about our inherent worth by holding us, by loving us when we cry, by feeding us when we're hungry, keeping us feeling good and warm, and the pleasure of being, feeling connected and held. loving us whether or not we perform or achieve. And when we don't receive that, that's conditional, we're wounded. Even when it doesn't matter what was intended, it's not the point. Most of our parents were just as wounded and were also conditioned in the same ways. So the feminine parent teaches us worth through emotional availability and attunement. The feminine energy in our families is where we get that. So when any of that's missing or warped for any reason, that wound is created. Even just being part of the public school systems or any school system, and you're forced to sit in at a desk, and you're punished for socializing, you're punished for daydreaming, you're punished for wanting to move around the room or play outside. You should be focused, and up in your head and keep your body, anesthetized. That creates that wound as well, right? So we all have it. And the medicine for Chiron is inside the wound. Chiron himself, what makes him a healer is that he stays. He doesn't abandon himself the way he was abandoned. He turns toward his own wound with the same care that he gives everyone who comes to him, everyone who comes for teaching and for mentorship and for his wisdom. And that refusal to leave himself is part of where the wisdom comes from. So the medicine of Chiron in Taurus is not a project of improving the body. It's the slow, present return to your body as a place that you're allowed to live. So there's a model that the next few years offer, not rising above the body, but coming back into it with tenderness. The word tenderness has the word tend in it, right? So becoming for your own body the mother who doesn't turn away. The timing is as follows. June is the first taste. Chiron crosses into Taurus on the 19th, but he'll station retrograde, which means he'll start to appear to move backward in the sky in early August and step back into Aries in September. And then return. So he'll return to finish the last of his Aries business, right? The closing up the wound around our right to exist and our I amness. And then he doesn't quite settle into Taurus for the long years until the spring of 2027, before he turns back to complete what came before. So whatever's coming up now is the overture. We're going to get into the rising signs, so you can find your rising sign here and that of your friends and family if you wish. And if you want an even more personal look at your Chiron or your natal chart in general and what your map ahead looks like, you can get a reading with me, and you can also work with me more closely by joining my Patreon, and we get more deeply into all of this. If you have Aries Rising, this is going to happen in your second house, which corresponds to Taurus. In modern astrology, it's the house that is self-worth, what you have, which includes your body, your resources, your finances, and it's the house where your money and your finances connect to that inherent sense of worth and your ability to connect to the physical world. The wound here is in those themes of worth, and Aries is direct in its essence. Aries, you hunger for experience and you directly go for what you want. That's part of the essence of Aries. So it can be that your appetite, your need, the unhidden reaching, that then gets internalized as the ugly thing, the too much thing, the part that you worry will make people pull back. And maybe they have at some point because, everyone's internalized these things themselves. And sometimes someone who is direct can trigger someone else's wounding. So there could be a suppression here, and maybe even overinflating to try to, make up for where this wound is in your sense of worth. Yeah. So under this crossing, an old shame can flare in your physical nature, and maybe making you want to make yourself smaller the moment you're caught wanting something openly, right? So Chiron knows that the hunger is not an ugly thing. It was called monstrous, but Chiron was the gentlest being in that world, and inside that contradiction, he can tell the difference between what we're ashamed of and what is actually shameful. Chiron's wisdom for you is, as he would speak it to you, hunger is not a deformity. I was named monstrous from my first breath, and I have never found anything monstrous in wanting. The appetite is the life in you. It is the last thing that should be made small. If you have Taurus rising, this is a very special time for you, where you're getting to reclaim your wisdom, because this is in the house of the self and your presence, and also the body that you're wearing as you live your life, right? So it's the way that your body is perceived by others and the way that you interface with the world through your physicality. So the Taurus wound is that your strength is also sort of where the wound lives. Your strength is in your physicality and your presence and your ability to delight in the senses and move slowly. And this is also what's being awakened. This shame, perhaps, in the thing that makes you most you, which is your connection to your physicality. This can be, an old ache about your form, a way that you don't feel safe in your body because you don't like the way that it looks. You don't like the aesthetic of it. There can be wounding around your skin, your appetites, a sense that the physical creature you are is looked at as too slow, too of the senses. People want fast and they want cerebral and they want information, and you are at your essence about slow living. And so this is also the wisdom that you are here to share, is in the healing power of slow living and connection with the animal self and our more than human kin on this earth, connection to Mother Earth. So under this crossing, there's an inner war that can surface, the mirror that is hard to meet, the hunger you mistrust, the feeling of being a stranger or a warden in the one house that you can't leave, which is your own body. Chiron speaks to you, and his message for you is: a body is not made worthy by a kind glance, nor worthless by a cruel one. The eye that recoils reveals its own poverty and nothing else. The way home is your senses and being fully here in present time. You are always a child of Venus, goddess of beauty. If you have Gemini Rising, Chiron crosses into your 12th house. This is the hidden, the unwitnessed area, the backstage, where when you wake up at night at 3 a.m, that's your 12th house. And it's solitude and being veiled from the world. So it's what moves beneath the surface, where we're communicating mostly with our own soul rather than the social world outside. So the Gemini wound awakened in the 12th house has to do with moving past your body and struggling to be embodied at all. So somewhere beneath the bright stream of words There may be grief about your body, about being unlovely or unwanted, and it doesn't resolve by being explained, so it sinks into the dark, maybe, and waits while the mind stays busy on the surface. So under this crossing, that submerged pain can rise, a heaviness with no clever caption, a sadness that arrives in the body when the noise stops. And there's a call for you to really to pause and to be with yourself unwitnessed, uncommunicated, except with yourself. To tend and bring that tenderness to your most private life. So Chiron speaks to you and says, some wounds do not want to be explained. Mine never closed for all my knowing, and the knowing was not the cure. What waits beneath your words is not asking to be understood. It's asking to be kept company. It's asking for your twin nature to be acquainted with your soul. If you have Cancer rising, Chiron crosses into your 11th house, and this is the wider circle and the belonging that you feel when you're with your people and how you co-create with others as well. So the wound here in the 11th for you specifically, Cancer, can be an ache of someone who feeds others, that feeds the group, but is not sure that you are allowed to be fed. So you are the nourisher, the one who senses what others need and gives it to them before they ask. And the wound can be the suspicion that this is the only way that you're welcome, as the one who holds and not allowing yourself to be held. So if you arrived in the circle simply as a creature with your own raw needs and your own unfed hunger, what might happen? This could be where the fear arises for you. Under this crossing, that can, surface as a loneliness inside the company you tend, a fear of being a burden, and a difficulty receiving the care that you so easily give, especially in terms of nourishment. So what Chiron says to you is to be wanted only for what you provide is a kind of hunger no amount of giving will end. I learned this late, that the one who tends all others must also be received, or the wound only deepens. Your need is not a burden in the circle. Allowing the circle to nurture you is also medicine for the group. If you have Leo rising, Chiron crosses into your 10th house. This is a high visible place, the work and the role that the world knows you by, and it's your calling and your reputation, and again, how you're seen in the world. So the Leo wound in your body can be the terror beneath the radiance, that if people see your shadow, that you'll be rejected. And you're made to be seen, you're made to shine, you're made to be looked at and adored, but the wound can be the dread that the adoration is only ever for, the performance, the costume, the polished, presentable version, and that the plain creature underneath, the one who is tired and ordinary, and who doesn't always feel beautiful, that thing must never be shown, or the love may vanish. So Chiron says to you, admiration lands on the surface, but never touches the wound, which is why it can never quite heal it. I was revered by everyone and held by almost no one. The face beneath the light is not the lesser thing to be hidden. It's the only thing that can actually be loved. If you have Virgo rising, Chiron crosses into your 9th house now, and this is the far horizon. It's the search for meaning and for what is true. It's philosophy and higher learning and travel and what we believe. And so the wound in the body here is the inward turning blade. You can see clearly, you notice what is off, and you have an eye trained to find the flaw and to correct it. And the wound is that your eye turns on your own self, your own body, and maybe your body can become an endless project. Never clean enough, never disciplined enough, never quite right. And the search for truth large enough to live by gets sort of messed up by the conviction that you must perfect yourself before you are allowed to grow and to expand out into the world. The 9th house is also the house of what is holy, and the wound here can be, feeling like your body can't attain a level of holiness, that you somehow fail to qualify. And so Chiron says to you, I was the greatest healer alive, and I could not mend my own wound. And the not mending was the door my wisdom came through. The flesh was never of draft to be corrected toward acceptance. Anything you keep trying to fix is the very place where the light gets in. If you have Libra rising, the sun crosses into your 8th house. This is the deep water of intimacy. What is exchanged when two people meet? It's exchange of power and money and energy. So a wound can arise where you smooth things over at the expense of what is raw and wanting, what is unbeautiful, or at least that what you may feel is unbeautiful. Now, someone else who sees you in that may see that as your most beautiful self, but if you don't allow for it, it gets tricky to be able to show that and actually have the intimacy that you may hunger for. It's the needs that are not graceful, not overtly, the hunger that's not polite. So you may have learned to offer the lovely version and to hide the creature, contain the creature that hungers and wants to be close when attachment is triggered, can have actual needs and wants that don't look so pretty necessarily. And you can be maybe certain that the creature would break the spell and ruin everything. So intimacy becomes the place where you're most performed and the least known. So that can surface as loneliness inside closeness, right? That you're a geisha in your relationships instead of a participant who has their own right to pleasure and in truly being known, right? So Chiron says to you, the lovely surface cannot be held because there is no one living in it. Only the creature underneath can be met. What you hide to keep the peace is the exact thing that, shown, would finally let yourself be known. The hiding is the loneliness and the pain of that, not the safety. If you have Scorpio rising, Chiron crosses into your 7th house, and this is the house of relationship, and it's the mirror, the other, the significant other. It's the house of marriage, the spouse, partnership in general. So Scorpio, the wound can show up as the gate that stays closed And as Chiron travels through your 7th house, this can start to get painful. And the wound can show itself in the mirror of another person. And the hunger to be seen and to be held and to be wanted and need and raw want exposed. This can feel dangerous, and you may armor it before anyone gets close, testing and guarding and bracing for the rejection that maybe you're sure is coming once they see what you actually are. So feeling like when intimacy gets closer, your self-perceived maybe ugliness surfaces, and you're worried that the other person may see it too. You let them to the gate and no further, and you're certain that the creature behind it is the thing that would make them leave. So Chiron says to you, I let my students see I was wounded and beyond cure, and they didn't run away. They learned. A wound shown to the right witness who has earned it doesn't drive them away. The gate you have guarded so long wasn't really protection. It might just be painful loneliness in armor. If you have Sagittarius Rising, Chiron crosses into your 6th house, and this is your daily life, your diet, your day job, your work, and your attendance to your body, the care of it. Here, Chiron sits squarely in the house of the physical creature. So you, as a Sag, are the one reaching for the horizon, the meaning, the larger truth, and maybe the wound arises in how the body gets treated as a mule who carries you there, sort of overridden, pushed past its limits, ignored when it speaks, resented when it slows you down because you need to move fast, right? And your fleshly body, your nervous system and your heart and the pace that your body needs, which is slower than the fire element. It's the earth element, and it becomes the thing in the way of the journey rather than the one making it possible. And somewhere underneath is the belief that to attend to the body's small daily needs is to be trapped and earthbound and less than the soaring self that you want to be. And this can surface as the body finally insisting on being heard. Exhaustion or a symptom that can't be outrun. A forced reckoning with the animal that you've been dragging. And Chiron says to you, I am half horse. My wisdom and my wound both live in the animal, not above it. The body is not the thing standing between you and the horizon. It's the only thing that can carry you there. Tend to the creature, and the journey tends itself. If you have Capricorn Rising, Chiron's going to cross into your 5th house, and this is the house of pleasure, of play, of delight, the things that are made and enjoyed for no reason but for itself. So Capricorn, the wound that shows itself through the body, is a ban on unearned pleasure. So you build, you endure, you carry weight, you look into how is this useful? How is this productive? And your whole system runs on the law that things must be earned. It might do, right? So the wound is that pleasure refuses to obey that law. And so you might have decided that delight, joy, that serves nothing. Enjoyment with no purpose, that's not for me. Or it has to be paid first, or it's a luxury for people who are less serious than you. That's not good work ethic, right? To be simply delighted in or to receive pleasure without having first been useful can feel really uncomfortable to you, like a debt that you'll have to work off at some point. So under this crossing, that can surface as a difficulty letting yourself enjoy or suspicion, of your own desire, which Capricorn is, the symbol is the goat. Desire is part of being Capricorn. It's also an earth sign, and it has that in common with Taurus. So it is about the body and the five senses, and more than five senses. I've been saying five senses in this recording, but that's also just a habit that even I have. Our bodies have more than five senses. Our bodies feel energy. We can kind of sense when somebody's in the room when we can't detect them with our five senses. And that's our animal self that can feel, the energy ley lines of the earth and weather systems coming in, etc. And Chiron says to you, delight is not a wage. No creature is born owing labor for the right to its own happiness. The body's worth was never something to be earned, only something to be returned to. Set down the ledger, Capricorn. There was never a debt. If you have Aquarius Rising, Chiron crosses into your 4th house, and this is the root, the home, and the family you came from. So it's your original, sort of, again, where your roots are rooted, your private life, your ancestry, and what sustains you and nourishes you that isn't seen. So the wound may be felt in your body, in your origins. You are the one that sees past the present, who lives a little above the personal in the, the wide, cool air of ideas and the mind. The wound is at the root beneath that altitude, whether in the home you came from, the physical creature that you were, as a little child, the needy body, the hungry child, the soft animal self, and whether you were welcomed and held or merely tolerated and managed. And if the early ground was too cold to the body, you may have learned to leave it, to kind of live in the head where it was safe and unbodied, treating your own physicality as something distant and kind of faintly foreign, or getting in the way of the ideas and the ideals. You may regard your own body as too slow, or your inner child as being a nuisance or a whiner or something, So under this crossing, that can surface as a longing for a belonging that you're not sure you ever had. And maybe an old coldness around the body rising to be felt. So Chiron says to you, I was cast out of the first house I was born to, and I built another that raised the heroes of an age. The roots you come from do not get the last word on whether your body is welcome. You can lay a warmer foundation and live in it all the way down to the roots. If you have Pisces Rising, Chiron crosses into your 3rd house. This is your voice and the way you use it, your mental body and the way that interfaces with your physical body, and the way your thoughts affect your body, and sort of the way you communicate with the people around you, so your local environment. And for a Pisces who lives in what can be somewhat disembodied and archetypal and sort of transpersonal, where you feel everything, the collective unconscious moves through you and wants to be spoken, the wound here can emerge, and you feel it, of course, physically because it is in Taurus. This can be that you can't find words for what you're experiencing. And again, you dissolve the boundaries between yourself and the world. You carry an oceanic sensitivity, and the wound here is in your voice, in the hard act of saying, I need this, I want this, my body requires that. So naming a need so directly can feel impossible, like asking far too much, an imposition, selfishness. So the need stays unspoken or comes out softened and dissolved, maybe in apology. And just the fact of having, clear physical need can maybe make you feel sometimes like you're asking too much, and that you're not being sacrificial enough in some way. And it's so you can't quite voice it. There can be a block in your throat chakra. So under this crossing, it can surface as the ache of going unmet, of going unmet, because you can't bring yourself to say what your body's plain requirements are, and they keep drowning in your reluctance to name them. So Chiron says to you, a need spoken plainly is the most ordinary thing a creature does. The apology wrapped around it is the only part that doesn't belong. Say the plain thing. The body's want was never the imposition. It was the asking made small that went unheard. Leave me a comment and let me know what your rising sign is and what you anticipate for your healing journey of Chiron in Taurus over these next few months. And many blessings to you. Take care.